All right, Matthew, welcome to episode 74, a three-part series of the Performance Advantage podcast, where we bring sports science to the people with myself, Dr. Will O'Connor, PhD sports scientist and ultra athlete, as well as a coach and endurance sports science educator, with my co-host, Dr. Matt Miller, who is the inventor of BrakeCase, hardware and software for analyzing your brake power. He is also a lad.
Thanks for the introduction, Will. It's good to streamline it. Yeah.
So we have a three-part series around biking power meters, cycling, mountain biking, power. It is the hot topic in the cycling bike two-wheel world, and there's a lot to cover. So we'll split this one up into three parts. We've got, the introduction, picking a power meter, making sure you get the right one, which ones are the best, Matt's research study, which has been cited, numerous times around what power meters to get. Then it's about getting started. And then we've also got the third and final one around training with power. So we're setting you up pretty well here over these next three parts.
Yeah, well, this follows on real nicely from the fundamentals of training with a mountain bike power meter course that we're just finishing up. Launches soon, so by the time all these 3 episodes are out, that course is going to be ready. We already have people signed up waiting to get on that course, and that was actually really fun. So we figured what we'd do is we'd go back and redo the podcast that we did. I think it was like episode 3 on training with a power meter. It was so long ago, and we've come a long way since then with the things that we know and the value that we're able to provide to our listeners. Our listener base has really grown. So we wanted to go back and do that again and kind of really get into the nitty gritty for you.
All right, so part 1 of our 3-part training with power or cycling power series is picking a power meter. This is the question, Matt. If you Google power meter, what power meter should I get? The options are now endless, and we kind of need to figure out what power meter should I get.
Yeah, well, they're all different, right? Like we have chainring spider ones, left side ones, pedal power meters, wheel
Hubs.
Power meters.
Yeah.
So, but they're all kind of doing the same thing, is measuring our power. So I think by the time, if someone's searching this and they came to our podcast to learn about, they're already convinced that power is the way to train. And we firmly believe that using a power meter is the best way to train, the best way to get faster, the best way to analyze your performance and your training every single day. So we don't need to convince anyone of that, right? You're here, you believe that. So let's get into what actually is going on there. So I guess the way we wanted to start it was talk about what actually is power. So they're all measuring power, just in really different ways. So I guess basically power is a real simple metric. It's force times velocity. And in the case of a bike, it's torque times angular velocity. So if we know how hard something's being pushed and we know how quickly it's turning around, we can easily get power. Now there's lots of ways actually to figure out how hard something's being pushed, how much force or torque is being applied. And there's lots of ways actually to measure how quickly it's spinning around. So, and that's what the different power meters are getting into when they're using these different methods to get to power.
Yeah. So if I'm biking along and I'm looking at my power reading, what's that telling me?
Well, when you're looking at your, let's say, Garmin, it's displaying your power once every second.
Yeah.
So what's happening is inside of the electronics, they're constantly measuring the strain that's being applied. Most of them are done with strain gauges. So they're really, really sensitive little electronics that measure how much something's bending. Now, if you imagine like a crank arm, for example, and you put it between your hands and you try and bend it in half, it's not really going to move. Those are solid, right? So these are really, really sensitive, these strain gauges. They can measure that little tiny flex. Like we can't feel it, but it's measuring that difference between nothing and then a calibrated value somewhere along the way. And it's saying, this is what your torque is. And then if we multiply by usually our cadence, then we're getting our power.
Yeah. And power's measured in watts.
Yeah, so power's watts. Watts are great because it's an energy. It's a unit of energy. So it's work done over time. And energy equations are amazing because that's how humans operate. Like we take in food and we do work with our muscles, and that's all energy in, energy out.
Yeah, that's right. Right. So we're getting like an idea of the amount of work we're doing over a certain amount of time. Like
Yeah.
pretty much like, yeah, like the amount of what we're doing at that point in time, the power 300 watts is telling me I'm working at this particular level because I'm generating this much force on my pedals and my cranks are spinning, I'm pedaling at 100 RPM and I'm generating this much force. That's how much power I am then generating at that point in time.
Yeah. So it's your rate of work, which is really important to know because we only have so much energy that we can output until we're totally smoked, right?
Yeah.
So we actually covered this a lot because with our power meter course that we launched, it was really important for us to set the stage of what is power. So we really went in depth, like what it is, what it really means for you. And we also covered that in our sports science masterclass as well. We went really in depth in there.
Yeah. So you can check that out. And here we're giving like that taster, right? So Matt did this pretty cool study that I was involved with when we get this question, what power meter should I get? And at that point in time, there's those left only ones coming out. And I remember you saying like, there's no way, this doesn't work. Like how
nobody believed it.
Yeah, no one. It was too cheap. It was like it didn't align with what was already on the market. So surely it could not correlate to a like accurate value.
Yeah. So I guess like I got my first power meter in 2008, and the only thing that was really available then was the power tap. And that was you take this like real heavy hub and you lace it to like a reasonably light rim and you put it on your road bike. And that was the only way that anyone was really measuring power apart from this SRM power meter. That was, I think, like $3,000 at the time. It was crazy. And even the power tap was pretty heavy, or pretty expensive and heavy. So, I really got a taste of measuring power then. And I believed it, right? Like, how, like you imagine this power tap hub. You're like, yeah, I can imagine what's happening in there with the electronics. It's measuring the bending or whatever the heck's going on inside the hub, and then how fast my cadence is, right? And there was wires going to it that went to like an exclusive head unit. That was the only way that you could do it. And you believed it. Like it made sense. Like you had to put in this special wheel, everything. So I trained with that same exact power tap for a bunch of years until I think 2011, when I did a research study with power tap. And we'll get into that one later, but we were looking at how important is FTP, this magic metric for mountain bikers. So that was also a power tap. I'm like, yeah, I know this works. I believe it. Now I have a mountain bike one. Now I have a road one. And it's all really good. And we believe the number we're getting. So then I got a Quark soon after that. I think 2012 was when I got the Quark. And that was, they're owned by SRAM, and that had strain gauges inside the crank spider. So like within the chain rings. And that's believable.
Yeah.
Right?
Again, like you are trying to move your rear wheel, right? That's how we spin our cranks. It spins the main spider, which is like the main chain ring, which then, in turn moves the chain, spins the rear wheel. Like we start to move forward. So you're measuring kind of any of those points, like you're getting a good idea of flex, force, torque, rotation, power.
Yeah. And that's all super believable. Then though, when we were working on our PhDs, that's when Stages came out, which was a left side only power meter.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what year it would have been that they came out, maybe 2013 or 2014.
I think like the first one was like 2012 with Team Sky, but I don't think we would have like heard about it until 13, 14. Yeah. Okay.
So they were the very first, as far as I know, they were the very first left side only power meter. And this was really good because the power tap had a lot of problems, right? So I had to get this really heavy wheel on my bike, and I didn't really want to race with it, but I knew that if I wasn't racing with this power tap, I could be doing a lot better with my analysis of what I was actually doing. Like, we're not analyzing our races. What the heck's the point in having a power meter, right? The whole point is to find a weakness.
Yeah.
But no one wanted to race with their power tap. So there was lots of people out there not racing with it. So, okay, cool. Like Quark / SRM, whatever came out. And, Quark was basically a more affordable version of the SRM.
Yeah. Because the SRM for a long time, I don't really know where it sits at the moment, but it was like the gold standard. Like, it was like this full, in New Zealand, they were like $5,000, 3,000 real dollars. And you had to get both sides. You had to get it like professionally calibrated. And then pretty sure you had to get it professionally installed as well, or by a certified installer.
Well, you can't even replace the battery yourself.
That was it. Yeah, that was the one. Yeah. Yeah. And you had to have the, what were they called? The PC, their head unit.
Yeah.
Like, you couldn't just use your Garmin. Yep. So anyway, and people were like, well, it's inhibitive, right? I've just spent $5,000 on my bike. I'm not going to spend another $5,000 on like ripping a piece off of it and putting another piece on. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So Quark was really good solution there. That now you could get like a lower cost power meter that did the same thing and just read straight to your Garmin.
Yeah.
So that was really nice, but Quark power meter still had this issue that it's pretty expensive because you need to buy a whole new crank and this special spider. And the problem then is that you can only have one, right? So like, you get one and it's great. It works good all the time. I have one that I've had for like 6 years, a Quark. They work great. But the problem was like changing from bike to bike. Well, you would maybe only have it on your training bike or only on your race bike. So the beautiful thing then about these left side power meters is that you could have multiple power meters, and that way every single bike you own has a power meter. It's a huge first world problem, right? Like having a power meter on every single bike. But that was really good because now they're affordable, and it got a lot more people into being able to use power. So hugely expanded market. Now we have 4eyes that's also on the left side.
But why didn't you? Because it's non-drive side, right? It's just that left crank arm, and you don't even need to replace like anything except that left crank arm, which you can just do easy as. It's just a couple hex screws. Take them out, 5mm hex screws. Like, anyone can pretty much do that. Plop it on, and now everyone. I remember when Team Sky had them, and some of Chris Froome's numbers came out, and you're like, oh yeah, but it's left side. Like, it's just it's either reading low or it's just inaccurate. Like, why were people saying that? Why did you think it?
Well, so with a power tap or with a Quark, we know that if it's measuring the tension on the chain, that it's measuring both legs, right? Because both legs are pushing on the chain.
Yes, gotcha. Yeah.
So the problem is,
right.
Yeah. So full revolution. That means there's no real guessing going on because it's measuring and averaging the torque every second across both legs. Like, you're pedaling at 90 revolutions per minute, right? So that's 1.5 revolutions per second.
Yeah.
Right. So that means that both crank arms are involved in that cycle. And then there's some averaging going on. It's because we're seeing that number change every second. So the problem is when we see just the left side, there's got to be some guessing going on because we don't know what the right's doing. Yep.
We don't have that measure at the rear hub, or like, we don't have a measure of one of the points at which force torque has being applied 100% of the time. There or thereabouts, neglecting freewheeling and whatnot. So now we've just got like this one crank that's only going to measure it 50% of the time, and potentially even less than that because we're not applying force for 180 degrees of a 360-degree revolution.
Yeah, there's a bit of a dead spot there. So that was the problem we had with it. We're like, there's no way that this is right. So we tested it, and that was really cool to be able to do.
Yeah. And
Okay. So should we talk about how we did the test? Because I still, this photo always pops up in my Facebook memories of like, I had just biked into the uni or something. And so I had sweatpants on because it was winter. And I have Will on the treadmill.
yeah,
So we used the same bike and we set it up with 3 power meters. And it was, so everyone used the same bike because it was a real pain in the butt to get 3 power meters on one bike. We had a power tap on the rear hub. We had a Quark power meter, like first generation kind of Quark power meter. And then we had a Stages left side power meter. So we had 3 of them with 3 different Garmins recording Will on this treadmill.
yeah. So it was like an industrial research based treadmill, not like your average.
Yeah, it was one of these massive ones that has a huge button on the wall to stop in an emergency. And then it has a harness to hold things and hold people. So it was a serious treadmill. But what we did is, I can't actually remember the specifics, but I think we did a set speed at 2 different cadences.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So we'll link that study actually below so that you can go read it. Because it was a pretty cool study. And at the time, no one had, I believe, tested the Stages power meter. So we had that treadmill test and we're like, okay, what if you're at a set speed, your power should be this because your weight is this, because it's a treadmill. So then all we did was change the cadence. So you should average 60 RPMs or you should average 90 RPMs on this treadmill. So that was the first part of the
study. And because
like
the speed's fixed, like you had to be pushing the same amount of power. Yeah,
exactly. So there's no variation like you'll see out on the road or even on Zwift, because you had to stay on the treadmill.
Yeah.
Otherwise. But so that was part 1. And then on that same bike, what we did is we went out to the trails and we did another test, just a cross-country lap. I can't remember how long it was, 5 or 8 minutes or something. We had 8 people do that. So the idea was that if we do these tests, we should be able to see where the actual difference is lying with these power meters. Because remember, at this time, we thought they'd be all different because they all are measuring in a different way. So we did that, and it took me, this is when I was kind of getting the hang of analyzing huge data sets, because it ended up being so much. And we had to do proper statistics and then report it properly for a scientific journal. It was, great learning process, great fun, totally loved it. But we found that there was slight differences in the power meters. And then the conclusion was that the difference was because of how cadence was measured, not because of a left side versus drive side versus hub situation. So what we need to kind of remember is that the models that we use were actually measuring cadence very different ways. So Stages had come along and they were measuring cadence with an accelerometer, which was really good because it could sample how quickly the crank was moving with very, very fine measurement.
Yeah, a lot more accurate than just the old magnet sensor.
Yeah, and that's what the Quark had. So the Quark that we were using was the older model of Quark, which you had to, I remember it used to come with this epoxy putty that you had to like stuff onto your frame. And then it also came with this real strong magnet that you had to line up perfectly so that it could measure the cadence with these reed switches inside the power meter.
Yeah, the SRM was the same. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, which isn't that great because you can only measure how quickly the crank's moving based on the space between the little reed switches. So,
and you like just mentioned like dead spots and pauses and
Yeah. So with mountain biking, as we know, like you're pedaling hard and then you're coasting, pedaling hard and then you're coasting. So that change from pedaling hard to coasting is a really short time. So being able to measure cadence really accurately is super important. So the main differences that we saw between the Quark, the Stages, and the power tap were mostly down to how quickly it was able to return an accurate cadence measurement to calculate power.
Right. And so from memory, they were definitely different between each other, but within So between subject, within subject variation. They were different. If I was trying to compare my rear wheel power tap versus my left only stages, kind of no go. Whereas if you are looking at stages and just your state, most people are just going to have one power meter on their bike. Just looking at that, you're good to go.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the important point, is that, okay, we have this stages power meter, just because that's the brand we used, and there's lots of them now. We have this that's cheap, and it produces the same measurement over and over and over. So if I do the same mountain bike track over and over, it's going to give me the same power if I pedal the exact same way. And that's the important point. So that means I can go out and buy one and rely on it. And that was really, really important. A great finding.
Yeah. And then that kind of leads on to, well, what one, Matt, do I get?
I really do get asked this a lot. How people say, oh, I get asked this question all the time. I really do get asked this all the time.
Yeah, so do I. I'm not really in the triathlon world, and definitely not the cycling world as much as I used to be. But we are who we are, right? So people are going to expect us to know these kind of things, being industry professionals, right?
Yeah. So I've tried most different kinds of power meters at this point. So, and I've been happy with all of them. So that's great, right? So I've tried some prototype ones that go inside the bottom bracket, and that was really nice because it was rechargeable. So Raceface have a rechargeable power, Raceface and Easton, because they're the same company, and you just plug in your phone charger into this power meter to recharge it, and it lasts like a month before you have to recharge it. Amazing. And it recharges really, really quickly. So that one was great. That was a left side only inside the bottom bracket. Loved it. Worked really good. Stages, there were some reliability issues as far as water damage. So
I had water damage on mine.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure everyone that had an early stage power meter had water damage, and this is really important, they were really good with fixing them. So you could buy one, and if you had a problem with it, they would sort you out right away. And that's really what you want when you commit to a company, is you want really good customer service. So Stages, they did have some water reliability issues for a bit. They seem to be all sorted now because a lot of my clients have them.
We probably shouldn't even comment on that, because that was like half a decade ago, and now they're up to like generation 4 or 5, I think.
Okay. Yeah, and that's fair. That's a really fair point.
And there's as far as I'm aware, like there's no issues.
Well, it's the same kind of thing with my Quark power meter. The first one that I got had the battery and the electronics used to sit out a little bit off of the spider. So when you drop your chain, and if you continue pedaling, which happens, like your chain would fall off. They were so bouncy chains in 2012. So you would pedal and then it would rip off the electronics. So I did that like 2 or 3 times, but they were also really good with warranty. But now the one that I've had since like 2014, still working on one of my bikes.
Yeah.
So that's a really good company. Really rate their stuff. Have the newest one as well. Definitely really good. Power Tap, I'm not really sure if they're making the rear wheel setup anymore. I know that SRAM acquired Power Tap a few years ago, and I'm not really sure what they're doing with that setup.
Yeah, because they had the P1 pedals, which is a road pedal, and I heard good things, but I haven't heard because Cyclops is different, than
Same company.
Same company.
They're owned by Cyclops.
Yeah. I think they kind of just I think SRAM just shelved them.
Well, it would make sense though. One of the really nice things is that PowerTap owned this design for the pedals, and that would be a really good design for mountain bikes, because pedals are really easy to change. And normally, like, you're only going to have a couple pairs of pedals anyway, and you'll switch them between bikes. I do it all the time. I have my Flash XTR pedals that are totally bomb-proof, and they have some like real crappy Shimano ones that I ride in the rest of the time because they're just going to wear out. But so changing pedals is pretty simple, and I really like the idea of having a power meter pedal. So SRM also introduced one, And I can really see the application of that, especially for e-bikes. So in an e-bike, there's no, like you could measure power in the chainring spider, but then you're also measuring what the motor does.
Yes.
So there's no way to actually isolate what you're doing as the person, unless I guess you could do left side.
You could do left side, yeah.
But I think you'd miss I haven't actually thought about that much, but pedal would be a really good spot to do that, to measure power on an e-bike. It's a great way to have a more expensive e-bike too. You could be up to like 25 grand.
Yeah,
with the best
nice.
one. So I do see value in eventually having more options to measure power in the pedals, because Garmin do it. I think it's Asioma.
Yeah.
Do it. And then people have converted the pedal body to a mountain bike.
Of the Asioma, Gioma. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And for me, I recommend, depends on I'll just do it. I recommend the Garmin's, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm not dealing with many, like one mountain biker every other month kind of thing, but generally it's cyclists and triathletes. And I say, you've got the time trial bike and you've got your road bike. Super easy to switch those Garmin's over. And most people have Garmin head units, and the way they talk to each other is like it's the same language, right? And as you were saying to me earlier, like Garmin love to change the way they do things without telling anyone. No issues there. Like it's just they're the same company. And then there's like not really a price restriction there. They are more expensive than the left only. And then left only also really good on road triathlon time trial switching over, because you just switched over. But what can be annoying, like what I found, was I had 165 on my time trial bike, and then I had 175 on my road bike, so I could get in a more aggressive time trial position. Now I can't use it.
You wouldn't want to use 175s when you're like in your era position. That would not feel good.
Yeah, especially when you've got to run off increased hip flexion. But anyway, so that's what I recommend. And well, pretty much from your study, whatever you're going to buy is going to be awesome.
Yeah, like that's really the bottom line, is companies don't really want to put out something that doesn't work, because then their company isn't going to last, right? So if they give you something that doesn't give the right power number, they're going to never last as a company. So they're going to give you something that actually works, and they want to be able to support it. Pretty much anything you see out there is going to be pretty good. So just get one.
Yeah,
that's really the answer.
And you can keep hunting around online, and you can see, like I've seen YouTube videos and blogs written on these very niche, like edge case scenarios at which a power meter like gives a slightly inaccurate reading. Sprinting is often one, just because of the rate of, cadence at like 2 revolutions per second per side kind of thing. And they're only going to report every second. So I don't know, for a lot of us, we're looking at FTP, we're looking at percentages of FTP, we're looking at training, we're looking at an overall result. We're not looking at, we're going to look at a peak 10 second for sure. If it's 1,000 or it's 1,200, doesn't mean much.
Yeah. You start to get to split hairs when you're looking at little, like really tiny differences in really, really short-term power. And with that, like usually, like if you produce 1,200 watts versus 1,500 watts at the start of your downhill race or something like that, the effect that has on your performance is virtually nil, because you're probably going to break away all that pedaling anyway. And if you're producing that much power, you're probably spending more time in the gym anyway, and you'd be able to track your progress there. So I don't get caught up in those things, because it's not really a big deal. The more important thing is being able to track aerobic performance and track and guide your training as you go through the training cycle.
Yeah, so I guess when we're looking at them, first is just get one, right? If you want it, get it. The second would be to look at the practicality, right? So pedals kind of being first, I guess, and then left side maybe, and then whether you want why would I get the Spider or more expensive ones?
Well, the one thing that I really like about my Quark is that it shows left side versus right side.
Right, pedal
and
balance.
that is, yeah. So for me, my balance is really bad when I'm going easy, pretty good when I'm going hard. So it's something that I'm continuously trying to track and work on. And with the left side only, you don't notice that. So yeah, my favorite one is the Spider based. It's a little bit more expensive, but bottom line is get one.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, that'll set us up. And you've got a blog on this anyway, so we'll link to that in the show notes, along with the study that Matt did and the video for this. So you can go on and check that out.